Hello, hola, bonjour. Tune in every Tuesday to the Dear God podcast.
¿Y qué pasó?
Nah, we talking like it's 1995. Let go of that Wi-Fi. Let's laugh and cry, but never say goodbye. Primos y primas, que lo que, and welcome. Bienvenidos to the Dear God, Are We There Yet? The podcast con tu prima favorita. Soy Alicia Sanchez, and yes, this podcast is bilingual. Ahora, Dear God, in this context for my movement is whatever or whomever you want it to be. It can be the universe, religious God, Buddha, self, nature, lo que sea para ti. Dear God, Are We There Yet? Is a lifestyle community of question seekers. The goal is simple: to empower thought-provoking conversation, share happiness, and encourage each of us to never stop asking questions and having conversations that matter. It's all behind the power of helping people with one conversation at a time. And you probably are asking, if you're new to this podcast, why? Because we need it. Our friends and families need it, and the world needs it. Ya tú sabes. Don't forget to check out the YouTube channel where I talk about self-growth, budgets and business, and passion to empower. All right. Ahora vamos a hablar como 1995, because, I mean, who ducks anymore, right? Thanks to podcasts. But I have an amazing guest on my show today, and Mr. Laduc. It sounds like I don't know if I should say, can I call you Mr. Laduc, or should I just say Phil? What do you prefer?
I just prefer Phil, please.
Okay,
Especially
perfect.
if we're going to have a conversation.
Of course.
Let's keep it informal.
No problem. No, absolutely. I want to thank you, Phil, for being on our show. So for a lot of people on my podcast don't know who you are and why you're so awesome. So I want to tell them, if you can tell them a little bit about yourself. And then I want to definitely, for all my listeners, I'm going to go ahead and put a link to that, the interview with Bianca from Authority Magazine, because it was one of the interviews that I actually was able to look at and like, oh my God, I want him on the show because he has an extraordinary quote on here that basically says, whenever you achieve success, there's always someone around to throw stones at you, or, like people know, shade, or whatever they call it, whatever they're saying nowadays. But Phil, go ahead and introduce yourself to everyone and let them know a little bit about who you are.
Okay, I'm Phil Leduc. I'm based out of an outer rim suburb of Detroit, Michigan. I am a global consultant, but also an author. I write. I'm published on all six inhabited continents. I'm the author of two books. One is I Know My Shoes Are Untied, Mind Your Own Business, and it's social commentary about the ludicrous things that some safety professionals do. And most recently, Lone Gunman, Rewriting the Handbook on Workplace Violence Prevention. It's something the Lone Gunman is something I never wanted to write a book. My publisher contacted me and asked me to write it. And then when I was writing my second book, she stopped me and said, write this book. And I said, okay. And she said, it needs to be written by a man. And that man needs to be you. And so that really intrigued me. And I said, okay, why does it need to be by a man? And she said, because men are killing women in the workplace at record numbers.
Wow.
And nobody seems to care. And so if a woman writes this book, it'll just be kind of dismissed by men as another woman complaining about an issue. And so I said, okay, but why me? And she said, because you stand up for what's right, no matter who comes at you. So how can you turn that down? But it was, for me, it was very upsetting when I started doing the research. Homicide is now the number one cause of death in the workplace for women. It's ninth overall. Of that, 43% will be murdered by a jealous ex-husband or jealous boyfriend. 2% of men die in that way.
That's like those are like passion, passion they call like acts of passion, whatever, right? Where that's happening now.
they're happening more frequently, and it makes sense because um, as women and men both understand the dangers of bad breakups, of domestic violence, and when the woman finally leaves that, and it can happen to men, but we're talking about 80% of the perpetrators are men. Mm-hmm. So I'm just going to say men, but as that awareness grew, women started getting protective orders. And they would tell their parents, they'd tell their friends, they'd tell their neighbors, they would tell their mailman, if you see my ex, he's not allowed, find me, he's a dangerous man. But they would not tell their boss because they can't afford to lose the job.
Yeah.
And so that's true. That's a little bit about me, but that's really been absorbing me lately because after the book came out, it just seems like when I tell people, nobody cares. And that's really upsetting to me.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to go back to real quick. I'm going to rewind because I know my listeners are probably going to be like, why didn't I address this? But I understand. I don't even want to use the word I understand. I want to shift the conversation in the future for women listening out there that maybe they should, and editors like your editor, I appreciate that she found someone like you that are able to kind of be neutral in the situation. And you kind of know, like you just said, to kind of do whatever is the right thing, you're going to speak about that. So I'm happy you were able to write the book. But in the future, I want to shift the conversation for women to be able to write things like this as well, or even piggyback off of what you're saying, not just from a man's perspective, because you're right. There are so many signs that women, or even men, that they occur on a daily basis or in their own life, and they go to their employer, and you're right. They don't want to get fired, or they don't want to come off like they're complaining or bringing their home business in here, in there. So I just want to put out there that women can write awesome books like this too.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I would encourage them to, especially women who have experienced domestic abuse.
In the domestic violence, yeah.
Because that's so important for someone who, all I can do is quote statistics, and I've lost some of my friends, some of my female friends to domestic abuse by ex-husbands. So it's not like it doesn't touch me. But yes, I would really strongly encourage someone to come forward and talk about how it feels. Because all I can do is talk about how it feels as an outside observer.
So I have a question.
An ugly subject that nobody wants to talk about it.
Well, I want to talk about it right now because I feel like you're absolutely right. This is something that's on the hush that people don't speak about. And I think that now with a lot of, conversations like the Me Too and just a whole bunch of conversations, but the workplace is something that you kind of have your security, right? You go to work, you have your job. That's something that that's secure, that you trust those people, but you don't know how to go to your supervisor or your manager. And, like you just said, they're afraid to fire you. Can they do that legally? All right. Can someone fire you because of that? No, right?
Well, no, they can't fire you. It would be technically protected under HIPAA or Americans with Disabilities Act. You can't fire someone for being injured or ill, etc. But so they shouldn't be worried about that. But I just got back from making a speech on a completely different topic in New Orleans, and my PR manager was negotiating with a bookstore in New Orleans about having me do a author's event where I come and I read from the book, talk, had guided discussions, answer questions, sign books. And he said, well, I don't really know if it's right for us. I'm kind of on the fence. Well, while I was in New Orleans, coincidentally, they had 2 workplace murders where an ex-boyfriend Two in less than 2 weeks. And it's getting to the point where it's not even making the news anymore. And so I'm out there, I'm pushing, I urge all your listeners to push. We've got to get this. It's an ugly thing to talk about. Nobody wants to talk about it, but it happens. And you should do, I mean, I don't want anyone to become paranoid.
No, of course not.
And I'll keep this less graphic than it is in the book, but a friend of mine from high school was murdered by her ex-husband, and viciously. He broke the butcher knife and went and got another one to continue. He went to jail for 4.5 years.
That's it?
That's it. Now, think about this. This guy's out there somewhere. This is 15 years ago. He's likely got a wife or girlfriend, maybe kids. And I encourage all your listeners, men and women, to do some due diligence on who you're dating and who your loved ones are dating. There's a domestic violence database that you can look in if somebody's going to, because people don't change this pattern of behavior.
Yeah, no, it's something that you would have seen it coming. And para la gente que está escuchando, Phil está hablando de la persona y él estaba dando un ejemplo de alguien que él conoce, que la mujer la mataron, el esposo la mató a ella y además fue para la cárcel por 4 años, que eso es la violencia doméstica que la gente no están hablando ahora, eso no se habla y eso está como hush hush. And I wanted to ask you, so why do you feel like we're not talking about this? Why are we keeping this in a hush hush? Like, after you're doing all your research in your book, and why do you feel like this is that the government's not talking about this, or we're not making us think about it big enough? Like, what did you come up with when you're seeing it, when you were researching?
Well, it's interesting because when I've told people, I was outraged when I read that statistic. And since the book has come out, the National Safety Council has conducted a study and found that 70% of non-lethal violence in the workplace is perpetrated against women. Women are being beaten and raped and just horribly assaulted in the workplace. And no one should have to go to work wondering whether or not a coworker is going to attack them. So when I started telling people about this and talking to this, I found a pattern. Men get very defensive and say,
really?
those statistics can't be right, because they're thinking about their sisters, their wives, their daughters, their mothers, the women that they love that are in the workplace. They don't want to think that could be happening. Second, and when I talk to women, every single woman I did, they just slowly shake their head and say, yeah, nobody cares if you kill women. And I refuse to believe that. And I'm going to, like my publisher said, I'm just going to keep hammering on this and yammering on this. I've written 4 articles on it that so far that are published, and 2 more that will be coming out, a book on it. We've got to get this in the national dialogue, especially in this environment of hate that we live in, where everybody seems like they're mad at somebody, and if they're mad, they use violence, and it's very frustrating to me.
Well, and also the justice system as well. You just said 4 years. I mean, I don't know if you saw the Netflix film When They See Us. I mean, that is just an example of, being wrongfully persecuted. But then there's men that are in jail for 2 years, 4 years, and they murdered their wives. Like, that doesn't make any sense. And it's like the injustice of our justice system it's backwards, if you ask me. I mean, if you murdered someone, I don't think you should be going to jail for 4 years. I mean, you should be going for life. I mean, where is that?
And this wasn't a plea bargain. This was, they found he was charged with first-degree murder, which clearly he did. They found that it was a crime of passion, and he was eventually convicted, I think, of manslaughter, which carries with it a very light. It was, 4.5 to 7 years in prison for a life. And, not to get controversial, but I mean, both sides, men and women, are fighting and screaming over the life of an unborn child, but nobody seems to care that
about murder.
That women are being victimized horribly in the workplace. And that was, for me, the book was not supposed to be, about domestic violence, but that's what it became, because the more I learned, the more horrific it became.
Yeah. What would you
can't
say
ignore
to
those.
No, you can't. What would you say to a woman right now, either listening on the podcast, or, she knows someone who's kind of mentioned something to them? Like, what would you say would be like, they haven't gotten your book yet, but what would be the number one thing they should do if they are in this situation and, it's like you don't want to escalate it to another extent? What is the number one, like, if they don't feel comfortable going to their HR department or whatever, what would they do? What should they do?
Talk to someone. Talk to your HR department, or talk to your boss. Talk to a leader in the organization, because this is one thing I know: silence kills. If you're in that situation and it's gotten to the point where you've moved out and you've gotten a restraining order, tell your boss. They are not going to throw you out. They're not going to discipline you, but they do need to know how to best protect you. And all I can say is, it keeps running through my head in some degree or another, is silence kills.
Silence kills. Yeah, absolutely. Because the longer you wait, the longer the person can hurt someone else, especially in a time where we are, I think some of us are doing a lot better of coming out to being able to share our stories, even though the pain and the fear. Now, I know I switched gears, but I'm so happy we were able to talk about this, because this is something really, really important. I've seen it not only just in the news, but I've known people that have been not necessarily at work per se, which I didn't even know those statistics, to be honest with you. But I know that domestic violence is something super huge, and it's something that people in the hush, and they're like, well, they love me, or she loves me, or he loves me, and at the end of the day, they could end up dead if you're not seeing the sides. But so it looks like you fell just doing the subject. I mean, right? They told you to write about this, and you just fell. So when you say, the quote, whenever you achieve someone, there is always someone around to throw stones at you. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. I think that we've all experienced this. I grew up, I was born on a farm, working class. And I've traveled all over the world. I've written all this stuff. I've achieved some measure of success, but I always have what a friend of mine who is also very successful described as the blue collar chip on our shoulder. Because there's, in your environment, people often just can't be happy for you when it comes to that. Is it jealousy? Is it well, let me put it this way. I think that when they see success, if it's someone who's a stranger, well, they were born rich, or they got lucky, or they got connections, but when it's someone that they know, then it's like holding a mirror up to them. And they have to come to grips with, I'm no better than they are. And so if I could do this, it's not because I was born wealthy, or because I'm smarter, or because it comes down to one thing: I've worked harder. And people don't like to admit that someone achieved something because they worked harder. And not everybody. There's some people out there that are always willing to throw stones, to knock you down a peg, to make you remind you that you're not so great, you're not such a big shot. But there's a lot of people out there that love you and will support you, and they are proud of you. But there will be one or two, and I learned that the hard way writing, where people will, because I'm a stranger and because I'm out in this in social media, that will just say terrible things to me and about me. And I respond. I like to get people into a frothy rage and then say, I appreciate how brave you are to say these horrible things, call me these horrible names, knowing full well that your boss, your friends, your customers or potential customers, potential employers can all see this side of you. And that terrifies them.
Yeah.
But
it's an insecurity in a way. It's a certain type of insecurity. I was reading something about that. It's a type of insecurity or some type of way when people see other people's success or even seeing them doing something, they always have to, they're either upset at themselves because they're not doing it or they're not doing what they want to do, or they have to blame. Like, I like how you said, they say, oh, well, that person is rich, or that person, like they have to give an excuse of why that person is successful. But then they see, you or someone else that they know, and it's like, oh, well, we went to the same high school, and, so I think it's a certain type of insecurity. And you're absolutely right. Everyone goes through it. And I notice authors go through it a lot. Like, when I tell you, I've seen it on social media or even and other platforms where celebrities, of course, that's known. They always get shamed for whatever it is. But authors, recently, I have seen some things and I'm just like, what makes someone type these things behind the screen and think they're big and bad and bold? And because they're words, and although you can't take them serious, it does this, and it does make you feel some type of way, like wonder, does it or no? Does it affect you any type of way at all? Or you've already gone through that where you're just like, whatever?
No, I light them up.
Oh, you do?
I'm a better writer than they are. If they could write like I could, then they wouldn't do it. But and I do it in such a way that many people find it comical. But no, I don't think it's okay for somebody to throw stones at someone else's success. No. And I'm not going to stand passively by. Now, I'm Caucasian. I'm white. But as a child, one of my heroes was Malcolm X. And we had to write. It was. I got an A in the paper, but we had to write who was our hero. And I said Malcolm X because as a child, I was very young when I heard it. But he said, by any means necessary. You should defend yourself by any means necessary. And that made sense to me. I mean, I'm not a violent person, obviously. I wouldn't be, but I wouldn't be completely honest to say that I've never been in a fight. I was a scrappy farm kid. But, if someone were mistreating me and my children, we talk about, God, are we there yet?
Are we there yet?
And people make a kind of a mistake, I think, because Jesus said, whatever you do to the least of my people, you do to me. So whatever you do to a stranger, you're doing that to Jesus. And I thought, yeah, but Jesus was all about forgiveness. Then I thought one day, we're all God's children. So how does God, Old Testament God, feel about us treating one of his children like that? Anybody with children knows you do not want somebody mistreating your kid, and you will fight like a cornered bear to protect your family. And so I thought, I better start being nicer to people because I'm not going to want to have to explain someday why I called someone a bad name or or deliberately hurt, and have God say, "Hey, you deliberately hurt my kid. Let's talk about that." And that may sound silly to some. I like how you started the show. I've been influenced by many religions. I believe in karma, and so I think people really need to start with the whole splinter in your own eye before trying to correct the plank in your own eye before you try to remove the splinter from your neighbors. I'm very accepting of other faiths and even of atheists. I mean, I have not achieved a level of perfection where I can start to point out people's faults on their own. I mean, that's it's taken me quite a while in life to get there, but
none of us should.
We live.
Yeah, and none of us should because we're not perfect. No one is perfect, and that is I like how you mentioned that because you're right. I mean, this Dear God, Are We There Yet is about everyone. It's about conversations and questions that need to be, we speak about, speaking like it's 1995 before all this stuff. I always say 1995 because we didn't have like gadgets and gadgets, but it's true. It's about being acceptance. And you know what? If someone doesn't like you, that's their problem. That is not your problem. And you don't have to, and I think this is where a lot of people might listen to the podcast and they always listen to me and they're like, Alicia, tú tienes que, you have to be on one point. You're either in or out. And me, I feel like I don't need to be just one thing. I can always say, look, if I don't like this person, it doesn't mean I need to bash them or bash whatever. I just do not believe in that. I don't want to associate myself with that. I don't need to put that more negativity out because that's not going to do anything, So it's like, don't follow that. But that's just me. Everyone's different, But I like how you referenced what you do. You light them up. I'm going to use that. You light them up.
But the other
in a comical way.
Well, the other thing too is we need to understand that there's a couple of things that we cannot do. One, you cannot win an emotional argument using logic. So if somebody's highly emotional, you can have all the facts and figures and proof you want, and they will reject you because they don't want to believe it. They're emotional. And people who can't keep up with your logic will start to attack you personally. So when I write in my blogging, I don't care. It's stream of consciousness. I will deliberately poke and prod at people because when I get them to an emotional level, they can explode with that emotion, and then we can have a conversation. I've literally had people say to me, I walk into a trade show and they'll say, "Oh, Phil Duke, I hate you."
What?
And I said, "You don't
even know me." I know.
Exactly. And they said, and we start talking, and the more we talk, the more, and this is what I love about your podcast, the more conversational we became. This tension melted away, and he finally he's become a good friend. I mean, it's the online friend, but I see him. He says hello. He congratulates me on my life's milestones. And here's a person who hated me. And we overcame that by having a conversation, a good old-fashioned conversation. When we were miles apart and separated behind the walls of screens, and they really should call them walls, not screens.
Yeah.
Because you can't talk through them, you can't see through them. People construct entire identities that aren't there. So you've got to break down those walls, but people who can't argue a point logically will pick on my grammar. I have one person say, I couldn't, I'm not even going to comment on something where the grammar is so poor or that's so poorly typed. And I say back to them, if you are so good at grammar, you should be able to construct an argument back. Just tell me where I'm wrong. Just tell me where my logic falls apart. Well, no, I'm not going to. Well, they can't do that. So they can't do that. So they throw those stones at your success.
Yeah.
I'm a big supporter of President Obama, and people will throw stones at him. Well, I think it's that same kind of thing that I had. He grew up with his mother. He's not a wealthy man. He wasn't born with a silver spoon. He was in South Chicago. He dragged himself up by his own bootstraps and became president of the United States. And think of all the mud raking and the digging for dirt that they look for, and they find any tiny character flaw and they blow that up. And I think that guy has got to be squeaky clean, because and I have a lot of respect for him, but I think people throw stones at him and they'll say, well, Obama should be in jail. I said, for what? You got to have a crime. He's not even been accused of a crime. He's not even been close of that. And, at some point, you're just never going to understand hate.
Yeah.
And you're never going to understand that. And you don't want to go there. You don't want to be able to understand the hate. You just have to accept the fact that people have a right to feel the way they're going to feel, but they don't have a right to necessarily act on that feelings. I used to teach a class on conflict resolution. And I would start it by saying, I'm going to give you the greatest gift in the world. You don't have to like anybody else. You can hate everyone else. You can be the biggest bigot in the world, but you can't act on that.
No.
Not in this workplace, or we will fire you. You don't get to act that way. You can feel however you feel. As much as people will tell you you can control your feelings, you really can't. I mean, your feelings are chemicals in your brain that make you feel a certain way.
Yeah.
Now, how you act on those feelings is a choice. And I keep coming back. I feel like I'm a commercial for your broadcast or your podcast, but I keep coming back to when you verbalize your emotions, it allows you to work through them. If someone makes you angry, you don't punch them in the head. You don't yell and scream at them. You say, you're making me angry. Or better yet, I'm becoming angry because when you use that tone of voice, I feel like you're being disrespectful for it. And I've actually been, in a telephone conversation with a customer service agent who gets snotty, and I'll say, okay, let's stop, both take a deep breath, because when you say things in that tone of voice and when you use aggressive language, I start to feel my defense mechanisms coming up.
Like your wall.
I start a wall, and I start to feel aggressive. And all that's going to do is you've got a wall up, I've got a wall up, and we're slammed into each other's walls. And it's not going to amount to anything. This isn't a contest. We don't have to have a winner and a loser. So let's take a deep breath, and I will literally say, okay. And we let it out. Now let's start the conversation over. And I say, I want to know if you can help me, please. Now, it's very powerful. But when you tell people you're making me angry or it makes me uncomfortable, you get the right. You have your listeners should, if they take nothing away from what I've said, they should take away. You have the absolute right to feel the way you feel. It doesn't matter if someone thinks it's stupid. It doesn't matter if people think that you're overly sensitive. None of that matters. What matters is you feel that way and how you behave. Letting people know, beginning with a conversation. And if someone were to say, you say, I find that I feel uncomfortable when you say things like that. And oh, you're too sensitive. And then you say, well, no, I don't believe that I am too sensitive. I'm just letting you know how I feel. I'm providing you with information and feedback about your behavior and how I'm responding emotionally to your behavior. You can either dismiss that, or you can embrace that, and we can work together and have a conversation about it. But I'm gonna feel this way, and you don't get to call me names or diminish me in some way. A lot of times when people get embarrassed, I mean, when people have upset us, they get embarrassed, and then they charge in and they make it our fault. They blame the victim.
Yeah, like because you did this. But what you said invites an open forum for conversation, and that is something that we do let our emotions, especially as humans, we let our emotions react, take reaction of what we're going to say next or do next. Like you said, acting, like acting out instead of saying those words, but we should communicate. And it's easier said than done. I can tell you that from so many point of views, but it's so needed because there's such a great transparency when you can have that conversation, with easy words like, you know what you said kind of hurt my feelings. And it's not because I'm sensitive, but the way you saying this, is making me feel this way. And it sounds like, I don't know, it sounds cliche per se, but it works. It really works because now you're not letting your emotions just be like, oh, well, you're a B and this and this and that, and you're gonna and da da da, and so what this man and da da da. I mean, like, now you're controlling those feelings to another level, and I appreciate you saying that. Phil, I want to thank you so much for being on the podcast. I do have one last question, which is like a fun question. What would you call your superpower? If you had a superpower, what would it be? What would you say your superpower? Yeah, okay.
Superpower is to become invisible to wait staff.
You silly. Why? Because they take forever?
It's absolutely. I can be waving my hand and then coming up those tables, like, excuse me, and they'll come right over. But yes, I can't control the power, but
my God, you are hilarious. And for everyone listening, I'm going to have Phil's his blog, but also I'm going to put a link to the both of the books. I know my shoes are untied, mind your own business, but also the one that we've been talking about the entire episode today is basically the lone gunman, and he has a lot of good information there. Again, I will also leave. There is a domestic violence number that I would put on there, which is the National Domestic Violence Hotline. I think, Phil was saying about hablando con alguien, no importa quién es, but just speaking to someone and putting that information out there instead of staying silent. And so I'm going to put all that information on the bottom of this. And if you have any questions about anything, go ahead. You can reach out, Phil. I don't think he will on his website ask me questions about something. If you have your job, maybe that where you work at, and maybe you want your company to, I don't know, have these books and give them to everyone, or a training, or whatever the case is, I think that Phil will be very happy to do some training or to provide an open forum about this, because this is super, super important. The more we share these conversations, we ask these questions, and we shed light to these things that matter to us, without waiting for it to hit home to us, without knowing that there's someone else that we know that died because of this, and we could have helped prevent it just by spreading the word. again, please go ahead and do that. It just takes one conversation, one question to help someone else. Until next time, everyone, with lots of love. And we'll see you next week on another episode of Dear God. Are we there yet? Thank you so much, Phil, and you have a beautiful day.
Thank you. I didn't mean to hijack your interview.
I love it.
I did.
I love it. No, you are fine.
It's been a real pleasure. Thank you.
You're welcome. Have a good one. Bye-bye.
Bye.